Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling a really diverse set of sources. It jumps from major international conflicts, humanitarian crises, all the way to, well, political fact checks and even some surprising science.
It's quite the range, isn't it? But that's the point. Our goal here is to pull out the critical threads, connect these seemingly disparate pieces for you quickly.
Right. We want to give you the essential details, help you see the links, understand the nuances, things like precise definitions that become incredibly important without you getting bogged down.
Exactly. And a theme that seems to emerge is this tension between, overwhelming conflict and the absolute need for clarity, whether defining atrocities, political stances, or even chemical processes.
Okay, let's jump in. We'll start with a situation the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres warns is, quote, spiraling out of control. Sudan.
Yes, the war there. It's incredibly serious. The conflict between the Sudanese armed forces, the SAF, and the paramilitary RSF Rapid Support Forces has just escalated dramatically, especially in Darfur.
And the really big news right now is the RSF seizing El Fasher. That was after, what, an 18-month siege?
That's right, an 18-month siege. And this isn't just another city falling. El Fasher was the last Darfur state capital not under RSF control. Now they hold all five.
All five. So that gives them pretty much complete strategic dominance across Darfur.
It's a massive strategic game, yes. It fundamentally shifts the power balance, makes any peace process far more complicated. And this comes alongside really horrific reports.
Yeah, I saw those. Allegations of atrocities, RSF troops reportedly posting videos of civilians being shot, even inside a maternity hospital.
Exactly. That detail, the maternity hospital, that's the kind of thing that grabs international attention. The ICC, the International Criminal Court, is reportedly already gathering evidence on alleged mass killings and rape in El Fasher.
And just the sheer scale of this war, 2 years now, over 150,000 people killed.
And more than 14 million displaced. The humanitarian cost is just staggering.
So what about diplomacy? Is anything happening there?
Well, the U.S. has proposed a peace plan. It's got backing from Egypt, Saudi Arabia, the UAE calling for a 3-month humanitarian pause.
But the Sudanese armed forces, the SAF, they're pushing back hard against that, right?
They are. The Sudanese ambassador to the UK wasn't talking about a pause. He's demanding the U.S. label the RSF a terrorist group.
And cut off arms sales to the UAE, who are allegedly backing their RSF, that the UAE denies this.
Right. His point seems to be, stop the atrocities first, then talk ceasefires. A pause now, he might argue, just lets the RSF consolidate those huge gains they've made.
Okay, so if we stay on this theme of conflict and humanitarian fallout, let's look just south to South Sudan. There are warnings of famine there.
Yes, serious warnings. A key global hunger monitor, the IPC Integrated Food Security Phase Classification, is flagging a famine threat in parts of the country.
Specifically,
they're pointing to about 28,000 people in Nasir and Fangak counties who are facing Phase 5. Catastrophic food insecurity.
Catastrophic, that's the absolute worst level, isn't it? Basically starvation.
It is. And a key reason for this is aid access. Reports say no food aid has reached certain conflict areas, like the Sobat corridor, at all this year.
Why not? What's blocking it?
Well, it seems to be a mix of heavy fighting, but also government military operations. There have been dozens of aerial bombardments reported in those areas.
So is this deliberate? The opposition, the SPLM-IO, is accusing the government of blocking aid to punish civilians.
That's the accusation, yes. The government denies it, naturally. They've put out statements saying, food cannot be used as a weapon of war.
But it's hard to square that statement with the reality on the ground, where military actions seem to be directly preventing aid from reaching starving people.
It's a grim picture, and it highlights how state actions, whether direct conflict or controlling access, can create these devastating humanitarian outcomes.
Which actually serves as a bridge to our next point. We've talked about state force in international conflict. What about when that force is turned inward domestically? Let's look at Brazil.
Right, the recent police raid in Rio de Janeiro, in the Complexo do Alemão and Complexo da Pena Favelas.
This was huge. A massive operation supposedly to execute arrest warrants, but it ended up being the single deadliest police raid in Brazil's history.
The numbers are just shocking. 121 people killed, 4 officers, yes, but 117 others.
And the details coming out, mutilated bodies being dumped, a 14-year-old killed, a 19-year-old decapitated, his head reportedly displayed on a tree.
It's incredibly brutal. And it's created this deep political divide.
President Lula on the left called it a disastrous massacre. He's pushing for an independent federal investigation.
But Rio's governor, Claudio Castro, who's more right-wing, he actually hailed it as a success. A blow against the Red Command drug faction.
And the public, how are they reacting?
That's the really complex part. Reports suggest there's actually significant public approval for these kinds of heavy-handed operations, despite the horrific death toll, even higher than the infamous Kirandiru prison massacre back in '92.
Wow, so you have security experts saying this kind of violence doesn't actually solve the underlying crime problem. There's that quote, "If killing people fixed the problem, Brazil would be Switzerland."
Exactly. Experts argue it often just fuels more violence long-term.
But the public, or at least a significant portion, supports it anyway. How does that work?
Well, it seems people are desperate for safety, for any action against perceived criminals. And leaders like the governor can frame these raids as decisive victories, tapping into that public fear and frustration, even if the long-term data suggests otherwise. It's about projecting strength.
A very different kind of battlefield, but still about the state using overwhelming force. Which, I suppose, brings us back to a more conventional war zone, Ukraine and the fight for Pokrovsk.
Yes, Pokrovsk in western Donetsk. It's strategically vital, a major transport and logistics hub. Russia's been pushing hard to take it for over a year.
And the latest. Heavy fighting, is that right? Russia's claiming advances.
They are. Russian sources claim they've cleared dozens of buildings. Ukraine, meanwhile, disputes claims they're being encircled, saying recent losses are marginal. It's, the usual fog of war with conflicting reports.
But the stakes are clearly high. If Russia did take Pokrovsk, what would that mean?
It would be significant, probably their biggest gain symbolically and tactically since taking Avdiivka early in 2024. It could potentially open up routes towards other key cities like Kramatorsk and Sloviansk.
It's a gateway city, then.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And President Zelenskyy visiting troops nearby recently really underscores how critical Kyiv sees this fight.
And international support is still flowing. I saw something about Germany.
Yes, Germany's planning another $3 billion in support for Ukraine, but for 2026, mostly for things like artillery, drones, and replacing Patriot air defense systems. So the commitment is definitely looking long-term.
Okay, so from the clarity, or maybe the lack of clarity, on the battlefield, let's pivot to clarity in language, specifically political language. We need to look at the New York City mayoral race.
Ah, yes, the claims around the Democratic nominee, Zoran Mamdani, specifically this idea that he wants to legalize prostitution.
Right, that phrase gets thrown around a lot, but it's not accurate, is it?
No, and the distinction is crucial. Mamdani himself has confirmed he supports decriminalizing sex work. That means removing criminal penalties for the sex workers themselves, for consenting adults involved.
It's not the same as legalization, which implies what the government setting up regulations, licensing, overseeing the whole industry like any other business.
Exactly. Decriminalization is about removing the criminal aspect for the individuals involved, often framed as a safety measure. Groups like the WHO, the UN, they argue it allows sex workers safer conditions, better access to health care.
Does it impact trafficking, though? That seems to be a key concern.
That's where the data is less clear, honestly. There are arguments on both sides about how decriminalization affects trafficking rates. It's complex.
And there's another label being used against him, communist.
Yeah, that was being pushed by figures like former President Trump and some conservative media.
Which is just factually wrong.
Completely misleading, yes. Mamdani identifies as a democratic socialist. Experts point out he operates entirely within the democratic system, runs for election, and doesn't advocate for core communist ideas like abolishing private property or having the state control everything.
So it's pure political rhetoric, using communist as a scare word.
Pretty much. It taps into old Cold War fears, but it doesn't accurately describe his actual political platform or ideology. Again, precision in language matters hugely here.
That need for precision definitely extends to legal situations, too, like this Georgia drug case involving Culley.
Right. So on the surface, she pleaded guilty to bringing drugs into Georgia, flew in from Thailand via the UAE. Seems straightforward.
But her defense adds a huge layer of complexity. She claims she was forced into it, tortured by gangsters with a hot iron.
Exactly. And that claim of coercion is central. It raises the question, if you're forced under extreme duress, does that negate your criminal responsibility?
Did the authorities take her claim seriously?
It seems so. Georgian police actually launched a separate investigation, specifically into her allegations of being coerced. So they're looking into both sides, the drug importation and the potential trafficking torture situation she described.
And she was held in pretrial detention.
Yes, initially, in what the reports called stark conditions, at a place called Rustavi Prison No. 5, before being moved to a mother and baby unit. But the key legal point is that the system has to grapple with that coercion claim. It's not just a simple guilty plea.
Okay, let's shift gears completely now, from legal definitions to, well, chemistry. And specifically, bad smells doing good things.
Ah, yes. This is a fascinating bit of research from popular science about nail infections, things like paronychia, onychomycosis, fungal infections, basically.
These are really common, right? Affecting maybe 10% of people, but way more in older
Up
adults.
to nearly half of those over 70, yeah.
Yeah.
And they are notoriously stubborn, really hard to treat effectively.
Why is that?
The main problem is getting the medicine to the infection. Topical creams and things often just don't penetrate the nail plate very well, so the active ingredient can't reach the fungi or bacteria hiding underneath. People often end up on long courses of oral drugs, which can have side effects.
Okay, so what's the breakthrough?
It involves hydrogen sulfide, HUS. That's the gas, famous for its lovely rotten egg smell.
Wait, that gas, how does that help?
Well, researchers found that as a gas, it can actually penetrate the nail plate much, much better than current topical drugs can. It gets through that barrier.
Okay, it gets in, but what does it do once it's there?
It messes with a microbe's energy production. Essentially, it disrupts the way the fungi or bacteria generate the energy they need to live, causing them to die off. It attacks their fundamental metabolism.
That's clever, sort of starves them from the inside.
That's a good way to put it. And the researchers are optimistic. They think they can develop a topical product based on this within about 5 years.
Using tiny amounts, I assume, so it's not toxic and hopefully doesn't smell too bad.
Yes, they stress the amounts needed should be well below any toxicity levels. And presumably they'll work on the odor profile. But it's a great example of finding a new use for a familiar, if unpleasant, chemical.
Definitely unexpected. Okay, and just quickly before we wrap up, a lighter note, the UK honors list came out.
Right, a few notable names. Sir David Beckham finally got his knighthood, called it his proudest moment.
Also, Sir Kazuo Ishiguro, the novelist, was made a Companion of Honor.
And Dame Elaine Page, the West End star, recognized for her services to music and charity. Just a quick cultural marker.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground today, from the grim strategic realities in Sudan and the fine lines of political definition in New York, all the way to rotten egg gas potentially cheering nail fungus.
It really shows the value of digging into the details, doesn't it? Understanding why the RSF controlling those capitals matters, or why the difference between decriminalization and legalization is so critical in a political debate.
Absolutely, the details change the whole story.
Throughout this, we kept seeing examples of how power is used and how violence gets defined. Aid being blocked in South Sudan, a police raid in Brazil being called both a success and a massacre, the ongoing war in Ukraine.
Which leaves us with something to think about, doesn't it? We see states using force all the time, police forces domestically, armies internationally. When does that use of overwhelming force cross the line? When is it seen as a necessary, if harsh, action by the state? And when does it become universally condemned as an atrocity?
It's a critical question, and the line can be incredibly blurry, often defined by perspective and politics as much as by facts.
But hopefully after this deep dive, you have a clearer sense of the details on both sides of that line, from the favelas of Rio to the battlefields of Darfur and Donetsk.